Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the April 2025 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook and discussion of a talk with the American Correspondent Anna Louise Strong by Mao Zedong from 1946. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or buy me a coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. So this piece comes to us from the Maoist Documentation Project, and it can be found within the Mao Zedong archive, within the Marxists Internet Archive at marxists.org. Thanks as usual to MIA for hosting this and thousands of other free Marxist texts. So this one begins with a note from the editors. It reads, "This is a very important statement made by Comrade Mao Zedong on the international and domestic situation not long after the conclusion of World War II. Here, Comrade Mao Zedong put forward his famous thesis, all reactionaries are paper tigers. This thesis armed the people of our country ideologically, strengthened their confidence in victory, and played an exceedingly great role in the people's war of liberation. Just as Lenin considered imperialism a, quote, colossus with feet of clay, so Comrade Mao Zedong regards imperialism and all reactionaries as paper tigers. Both have dealt with the essence of the matter. This thesis is a fundamental strategic concept for the revolutionary people. Since the period of the Second Revolutionary Civil War, Comrade Mao Zedong has repeatedly pointed out, strategically with regard to the whole, revolutionaries must despise the enemy, dare to struggle against them, and dare to seize victory. At the same time, tactically, with regard to each part, each specific struggle, they must take the enemy seriously, be prudent, carefully study and perfect the art of struggle, and adopt forms of struggle suited to different times, places, and conditions in order to isolate and wipe out the enemy step by step." On December 1st, 1958, at a meeting of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China held at Wuchang, Comrade Mao Zedong stated, quote, "Just as there is not a single thing in the world without a dual nature, this is the law of the unity of opposites, so imperialism and all reactionaries have a dual nature. They are real tigers and paper tigers at the same time. In past history, before they won state power and for some time afterwards, the slave-owning class, the feudal landlord class, and the bourgeoisie were vigorous, revolutionary, and progressive. They were real tigers. But with the lapse of time, because their opposites, the slave class, the peasant class, and the proletariat, grew in strength step by step, struggled against them, and became more and more formidable, these ruling classes changed step by step into the reverse, changed into reactionaries, changed into backward people, changed into paper tigers, and eventually they were overthrown, or will be overthrown by the people. The reactionary, backward, decaying classes retained this dual nature, even in their last life and death struggles against the people. On the one hand, they were real tigers. They ate people by the millions and tens of millions. The cause of the people's struggle went through a period of difficulties and hardships, and along the path there were many twists and turns. To destroy the rule of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism in China took the Chinese people more than 100 years and cost them tens of millions of lives before the victory in 1949. Look, were these not living tigers, iron tigers, real tigers? But in the end they changed into paper tigers, dead tigers, bean-curd tigers. These are historical facts. Have people not seen or heard about these facts? There have indeed been thousands and tens of thousands of them. Thousands and tens of thousands. Hence, imperialism and all reactionaries, looked at in essence, from a long-term point of view, from a strategic point of view, must be seen for what they are, paper tigers. On this we should build our strategic thinking. On the other hand, they are also living tigers. Iron tigers, real tigers which can eat people. On this we should build our tactical thinking." End of quote. For the necessity of despising the enemy strategically and taking full account of them tactically, see Strategic Problems of China's Revolutionary War, Chapter 5, Section 6, and On Some Important Problems of the Party's Present Policy, Section 1. And I would just add to that, if you're interested in the distinction between strategy and tactics and the relationship between them, see Stalin's Foundations of Leninism, Chapter 7, Strategy and Tactics, which we have here at Socialism for All. Alright, and that's it for the introductory note. We now get into the transcript of the interview of Mao Zedong by Anna Louise Strong. Strong. Do you think that there is hope for a peaceful settlement of China's problems in the near future? Mao. That depends on the attitude of the U.S. government. If the American people stay the hands of the American reactionaries who are helping Chiang Kai-shek fight the Civil War, there is hope for peace. Strong. Suppose the United States gives Chiang Kai-shek no help, besides that already given. How long can Chiang Kai-shek keep on fighting? And there's a note here. to help Chiang Kai-shek start civil war against the people. And incidentally, Chiang Kai-shek was one of the leaders of the nationalist Kuomintang, who were the on-again, off-again enemies of the Chinese Communist Party. They would team up to fight particular enemies, such as the warlords in the north in the very early days, and then the invading Japanese imperialists later. But then when there was no external enemy, they would fight each other for control of the country in the post-feudal landscape. Eventually, the CPC did win, and the nationalists retreated to Taiwan, where they set up the Republic of China, as opposed to the People's Republic of China on the mainland. Anyway, U.S. imperialism gave his government a very great amount of aid. By the end of June 1946, the United States had equipped 45 Kuomintang divisions. It had trained 150,000 Kuomintang military personnel, Army, Naval, and Air Forces, secret agents, communications police, staff officers, medical officers, supply personnel, etc. U.S. warships and aircraft transported to the front against the liberated areas 14 Kuomintang corps, 41 divisions, and 8 regiments of the Communications Police Corps, or over 540,000 men in all. The U.S. government landed 90,000 of its Marines in China and stationed them at such important cities as Shanghai, Qingdao, Tianjin, Peking, and Qinhuangdao. They guarded the lines of communication for the Kuomintang in northern China. According to data disclosed in United States Relations with China, the white paper released by the State Department on August 5, 1949, the total value of various kinds of U.S. aid given to the Chiang Kai-shek government from the time of the War of Resistance against Japan to 1948 was more than $4.5 billion. The overwhelming bulk of U.S. aid given during the War of Resistance had been hoarded by the Kuomintang for the ensuing civil war against the people, but the actual amount of U.S. aid to Chiang Kai-shek far exceeded this total. The U.S. White Paper admitted that U.S. aid was equivalent to, quote, more than 50% of the monetary expenditures, unquote, of the Chiang Kai-shek government, and was of, quote, proportionately greater magnitude in relation to the budget of that government than the United States has provided to any nation of Western Europe since the end of the war, unquote. And back to the main text, where Mao is answering the question, how long can Chiang Kai-shek keep on fighting? Mao says, more than a year. Strong. Can Chiang Kai-shek keep on that long economically? Mao, he can. Strong, what if the United States makes it clear that it will give Chiang Kai-shek no more help from now on? Mao, there is no sign yet that the U.S. government and Chiang Kai-shek have any desire to stop the war within a short time. Strong, how long can the Communist Party keep on? Mao, as far as our own desire is concerned, we don't want to fight for even a single day. But if circumstances force us to fight, we can fight to the finish. Strong, if the American people ask why the Communist Party is fighting, what should I reply? Mao, because Chiang Kai-shek is out to slaughter the Chinese people, and if the people want to survive, they have to defend themselves. This the American people can understand. Strong, what do you think of the possibility of the United States starting a war against the Soviet Union? Mao, there are two aspects to the propaganda about an anti-Soviet war. On the one hand, U.S. imperialism is indeed preparing a war against the Soviet Union. The current propaganda about an anti-Soviet war, as well as other anti-Soviet propaganda, is political preparation for such a war. On the other hand, this propaganda is a smokescreen put up by the U.S. reactionaries to cover many actual contradictions immediately confronting U.S. imperialism. These are the contradictions between the U.S. reactionaries and the American people, and the contradictions of U.S. imperialism with other capitalist countries, and with the colonial and semi-colonial countries. At present, the actual significance of the U.S. slogan of waging an anti-Soviet war is the oppression of the American people and the expansion of the U.S. forces of aggression in the rest of the capitalist world. As you know, both Hitler and his partners, the Japanese warlords, used anti-Soviet slogans for a long time as a pretext for enslavement of the people at home and aggression against other countries. Now the U.S. reactionaries are acting in exactly the same way. To start a war, the U.S. reactionaries must first attack the American people. They are already attacking the American people, oppressing the workers in democratic circles in the United States, politically and economically, and preparing to impose fascism there. The people of the United States should stand up and resist the attacks of the U.S. reactionaries. I believe they will. The United States and the Soviet Union are separated by a vast zone which includes many capitalist, colonial, and semi-colonial countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Before the U.S. reactionaries have subjugated these countries, an attack on the Soviet Union is out of the question. In the Pacific, the United States now controls areas larger than all the former British spheres of influence there put together. It controls Japan, that part of China under Kuomintang rule, half of Korea, and the South Pacific. It has long controlled Central and South America. It seeks also to control the whole of the British Empire and Western Europe. Using various pretexts, the United States is making large-scale military arrangements and setting up military bases in many countries. The U.S. reactionaries say that the military bases they have set up and are preparing to set up all over the world are aimed against the Soviet Union. True, these military bases are directed against the Soviet Union. At present, however, it is not the Soviet Union, but the countries in which these military bases are located that are the first to suffer U.S. aggression. I believe it won't be long before these countries come to realize who is really oppressing them, the Soviet Union or the United States. The day will come when the U.S. reactionaries find themselves opposed by the people of the whole world. Of course, I do not mean to say that the U.S. reactionaries have no intention of attacking the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is a defender of world peace and a powerful factor preventing the domination of the world by the U.S. reactionaries. Because of the existence of the Soviet Union, it is absolutely impossible for the reactionaries in the United States and the world to realize their ambitions. That is why the U.S. reactionaries rabidly hate the Soviet Union and actually dream of destroying the socialist state. But the fact that the U.S. reactionaries are now trumpeting so loudly about a U.S.-Soviet war and creating a foul atmosphere so soon after the end of World War II compels us to take a look at their real aims. It turns out that under the cover of anti-Soviet slogans, they are frantically attacking the workers and democratic circles in the United States and turning all the countries which are the targets of U.S. external expansion into U.S. dependencies. I think that the American people and the peoples of all countries menaced by U.S. aggression should unite and struggle against the attacks of the U.S. reactionaries and their running dogs in these countries. Only by victory in this struggle can a third world war be avoided. Otherwise, it is unavoidable. Strong. That is very clear. But suppose the United States uses the atom bomb. Suppose the United States bombs the Soviet Union from its bases in Iceland, Okinawa, and China. Mao. The atom bomb is a paper tiger which the U.S. reactionaries use to scare people. It looks terrible, but in fact it isn't. Of course, the atom bomb is a weapon of mass slaughter, but the outcome of a war is decided by the people, not by one or two new types of weapon. All reactionaries are paper tigers. In appearance, the reactionaries are terrifying, but in reality they're not so powerful. From a long-term point of view, it is not the reactionaries but the people who are really powerful. In Russia, before the February Revolution in 1917, which side was really strong? On the surface, the Tsar was strong, but he was swept away by a single gust of wind in the February Revolution. In the final analysis, the strength in Russia was on the side of the Soviets of workers, peasants, and soldiers. The Tsar was just a paper tiger. Wasn't Hitler once considered very strong? But history proved that he was a paper tiger. So was Mussolini. So was Japanese imperialism. On the contrary, the strength of the Soviet Union and of the people in all countries who loved democracy and freedom proved much greater than had been foreseen. Chiang Kai-shek and his supporters, the U.S. reactionaries, are all paper tigers too. Speaking of U.S. imperialism, people seem to feel that it is terrifically strong. Chinese reactionaries are using the, quote, strength of the United States to frighten the Chinese people. But it will be proved that the U.S. reactionaries, like all the reactionaries in history, do not have much strength. In the United States, there are others who are really strong, the American people. Take the case of China. We only have millet plus rifles to rely on, but history will finally prove that our millet plus rifles is more powerful than Chiang Kai-shek's airplanes plus tanks. Although the Chinese people still face many difficulties and will long suffer hardships from the joint attacks of U.S. imperialism and the Chinese reactionaries, the day will come when these reactionaries are defeated and we are victorious. The reason is simply this. The reactionaries represent reaction. We represent progress. And that is the end of the audiobook. What do you think? Leave a question or comment below, and we will continue the discussion there as always. Otherwise, thanks for listening. And thanks to the current patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. Every donation is encouraging, they're also materially helpful, and they allow me to spend a lot more time on this channel than I'd be able to do without it. So if you like this channel, thank me, but also thank the patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters and consider becoming one yourself. Beyond that, engagement counts, so like, share, subscribe, and remember we can agitate and educate online, but the organizing happens in real life. So connect with your local left, find out what organizations, parties, and groups are present in your area, network with people, try to find a project that you can get involved with, which may not be openly advertised online. That's why it helps to get involved and actually meet people. So see if there's something somebody knows of where you can use and expand your skill set to help to intensify the class struggle where you live. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next video.